Welcome to Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton, where we talk about legal matters that impact your life and your community issues that help you live the best life. The information presented on Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton should not be considered to be formal legal advice nor the formation of a lawyer-client relationship. It's time to talk justice. Now here's your host, Jennifer Burton.
Welcome tonight to Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton here on the News and Talk of East Tennessee, News Talk 98.7 WOKI. Thanks for tuning in this evening. I'm your host, Jennifer Burton. We're so glad to have you here with us this Saturday evening. Justice Talks is a show dedicated to discussing various legal issues that impact your life, as well as focusing on things in our community that can affect your happiness, your well-being, sometimes your health. We cover a wide range of topics on this show. We are heading into our fifth show this evening, which is so exciting. So we're still relatively new. I think we're probably at the sitting up stage of our show now. So moving a little bit past the infancy, we're starting to work out some of the kinks and just see what our listeners are enjoying. And we love having your input. So if you have any suggestions for the show, please feel free to email those to info@burtonmckinnish.com. That's info@burtonmckinnish.com. And we would love to hear from you guys. If you're just now listening in and you've never tuned in before, I just want to give you a little bit of backdrop about myself and kind of the show and our vision for it. Like I said, my name's Jennifer McKinnish Burton. I'm an attorney here in East Tennessee. I'm originally from right outside of Asheville, North Carolina, a small little paper mill town called Canton. If you've ever driven I-40, you've probably smelt it, especially if there was rain coming through. The joys of living in a paper mill town. I grew up there till I was about 12, then moved on to New England with a transfer with my dad's company, the same company, and lived in Connecticut where I graduated, and then returned back to East Tennessee to attend the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. I am a dyed-in-the-wool Vol fan, and I'll bleed orange if you cut me for sure. So despite being in Connecticut during the years that Gino was on the rise and him and Pat had their famous duels, I am definitely a Vol fan for life. So love being back in East Tennessee. After college, went on to law school over in West Tennessee at Memphis, and then moved back here back in 2006. So I've been back in this area going on 20 years now, and just love being back here in East Tennessee. Love the people in East Tennessee. I've been really blessed to be able to have my calling be to interact with people and help them. And part of that is being an attorney here in East Tennessee. And we have a law firm, Burton McKinnish, which is located originally out of Sevierville. We have a corporate office now in Maryville, but we travel all over. I joke we go from Bristol all the way down to Chattanooga. I think this next week I'm going to be as far west as Marion County. So just kind of go all over and all over East Tennessee. And part of the joy of getting to go all over East Tennessee is meeting all kinds of different people and just getting to reach out and spend time with people's daily lives. I love that. Part of the reason I was so fortunate when the opportunity to do a radio show came up was because that's another way for me to reach out to people and kind of hear back and help listeners in this case. It gives me a little bit outside of the arena of the law in that I'm not giving legal advice. I just get to kind of touch on some issues that are affecting East Tennesseans. And so I enjoy that. And we do this every Saturday night at 6 p.m. here on 98.7 WOKI. So it's a great opportunity, this show, just to kind of interact with people, to have different guests on. We have had people from, we've had political figures on. We've had people from entrepreneurs, different small business owners. Tonight we have an amazing guest. I can't wait for you guys to listen to her. We have Pam Frye with us from Harmony Adoption Family Center, and we are so excited to delve in tonight to all things surrounding adoption. Just can't wait to get her on. She's coming up in our next segment, and you guys are just really, I think, going to enjoy the show tonight. If you have a heart for children, which who doesn't, but if you have a heart for children and really want some more information on adoption or fostering or embryo adoption or international adoption, anything on that area, she's going to be an excellent guest for you guys just to get some information. So can't wait to talk to her. As far as our law firm goes, we have been here in East Tennessee, opened up back in 2008, and our vision was not to be a big mill firm, not to be, just another file, but our big big push at this point was just to say, hey, let's see how we can help people. And we want to be your family's law firm. So we always say, come in and meet with us. We do free consultations. And if we can't help you, then we're going to find you somebody that can. And one of the great joys of being an attorney, a lot of attorney jokes out there going around about how horrible attorneys are. And trust me, there's some that, I probably wouldn't throw if I could. But there's also some amazing people in the community and some great attorneys that do a lot of civic work, a lot of stuff through various community organizations, various religious organizations throughout East Tennessee. And I've just been really fortunate to work with some awesome judges, some awesome advocates. Also, there's so many people outside of just the legal field that come in and do great. And one of those tonight that you are going to get to meet, and I'm going to just do just kind of an introduction. Like I said, we've got Pam Frye, and we're going to get into some really kind of deep things coming up in the next segment. But I just kind of want to introduce her, give you a little bit of background. Pam has spent the first 15 years of her career working for a private nonprofit mental health center in Knoxville, providing direct services and program administration into the oversight of adolescent day treatment, early intervention programs, and a geriatric psychiatric partial hospitalization program. And then after she and her husband adopted a daughter from China back in 2002, she shifted the focus of her career to the field of adoption, and she joined the staff at Harmony Family Center. And Pam has served as a lead trainer for the Infant Adoption Training Initiative and Adoption Services for 10 years. And over the years, she has served with various roles with the Adoption Agency. And right now, she is serving as the permanency director. And so, Harmony, if you guys have never had any action with Harmony Family Center is an amazing resource here in East Tennessee. I was talking with Pam before the show. I had some girlfriends that worked there that were just awesome individuals and just hardworking and really enjoyed their work. So, Pam, I'm going to welcome you to the show now. I'm so glad to have you joining us this evening. Thank you for taking time out to come.
Well, it's great to be here. I'm excited to talk about adoption. It is my passion. I'm also excited to educate people about Harmony Family Center. Though we are a large agency, a lot of people in our own community don't really know about the breadth of the services that we provide to foster and adoptive families.
And Pam, you hit on a good point. A lot of people, I know I didn't until I met Ashley Jordan that we were talking about, who is a dear friend of mine from college. Until I met her, I didn't realize that Harmony, kind of the breadth of what you guys do. So why don't you just tell us, you guys are not just an adoption agency. Hey, I want to, adopt a child. You do a full spectrum of services. So why don't you walk us through some of the things that you guys do?
We really work with foster and adoptive families throughout the process. Here in Tennessee, we approve and train foster families for the Department of Children's Services. And we also help children who are in foster care find legal and relational permanency. So that's a big focus of what we do here at Harmony. But then we also support families after they've adopted children from foster care. So we provide intensive in-home family therapy to families who have adopted from foster care.
And I'm going to work backwards, Pam, because that's something, the in-home, after you've gone through, a lot of children that are placed out of foster care have been through trauma, have had some emotional issues. And so they get placed with these foster families. And so sometimes the traumas they've had early on in life, you guys help equip these families to help these children to adjust and to heal. So what is that process? How long does that work? Do you stay as long as you need? How does that process work?
Well, we have a program called Adoption Support and Preservation Program, and it is a free program for families that have adopted through foster care. We also work with families who have adopted privately or internationally as well, but those families do pay on a sliding scale fee. So we work with families around 6 months, and we go into the home and educate them about trauma, but also give them tools to help deal with that behavior.
And I think that's so important. And that's something I didn't know. I didn't know that you did it outside of the foster care program, because I know I've got friends that have adopted internationally, and children come of all ages, usually from international adoptions. And a lot of times they've spent quite a bit of time in an orphanage, and there is this transitionary period when they get into their adoptive families. So how do you help those families, especially when they're adopting to a whole new culture in addition to a whole new family?
Well, a wise person once told me that trauma is trauma And it doesn't matter if it occurred in Ethiopia or Etowah. It doesn't matter. Kids have the same types of issues or lingering effects of trauma. So what we do is we take a very psychoeducational approach and educate people about trauma, but also give them different ways to look at that behavior and give them practical suggestions on how to help them, the families, deal with trauma, and to also help their children adjust to the family situation.
Pam, hang tight because we're up on a hard break. And when we come back, we're going to continue talking more about different opportunities for adoption here in East Tennessee on the News and Talk of East Tennessee 98.7 WOKI. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton here on News Talk 98.7. Burton McInnish can be found online at burtonmckinnish.com or by phone at 865-233-1105. And now back to your host, Jennifer Burton.
Welcome back tonight to Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. If you're just tuning in, we're excited to be here with you tonight. Justice Talks is coming back, and we are with Pam Frye, who is the Director of Permanency and Adoption Services with Harmony Family Center. And we were talking last time about some of the, after the adoption happens, what you guys offer. So let's go back to that a little bit. So these families have adopted out of either foster care or international adoptions or private adoptions, and you guys offer some transitional services to make this a little bit easier on the families and the children.
Yes, we provide a lot of services to adoptive families who are in the process. We have preparation classes that we do. Those are 8-hour classes that we provide to families before they adopt their child from foster care. And then we also have support groups that we call FUSE groups, which stands for Families United, Supported, and Engaged. And we have those all across the state of Tennessee. And additionally, we have webinars that we offer for families who are here in the state of Tennessee. We actually have people from all over the country who dial into our webinars, and those are primarily oriented toward trauma and how to best parent children who are in foster care or being adopted from foster care.
And one question, Pam, do you guys have anything for like the siblings? I know a lot of times, and this is just personal experience, so I've had family and friends that have adopted, and the siblings have had a little bit of a bumpy road having these new siblings show up in their house all of a sudden, and how do they relate and how do they transition into their new siblings who sometimes have different needs than the children that were in home prior to adoption?
Well, our services are family oriented. So that includes working with siblings as well as the child who was adopted. And then also with our support groups. Those aren't limited to the child that was adopted. So siblings, all of the children in the family are invited to participate in that. And additionally, we have family camps for families who have adopted. And we have those out at our Camp Montvale in Maryville. And so, of course, all of the children of the family can attend those camps as well.
That is such, that's such a great service. And because sometimes, people are like, okay, I've done this adoption, now what? So this is a great way in order to make sure there's a healthy transition and these needs are addressed. Let's go back to the very beginning. And I know you've done a lot of work with traditional infant adoptions. And a lot of times, when I meet with clients, because our firm does do adoption work, and, I'll have prospective families come in, we want an infant, we want a baby. That's what we want. How does that process work? How difficult is it to adopt an infant? Is that obviously the older children get, the harder it is sometimes to place them. So what does Harmony do as far as the infant adoption program?
When people think about adoption, what most people think about is that traditional infant adoption, which is a voluntary process where the birth parents voluntarily surrender their parental rights and adoptive family legally assumes those rights. So that's what people really think about when you say the word adoption. But really, infant adoption really is statistically is the smallest type of adoption that occurs in our country. And it's estimated that about 13 to 18,000 children are adopted as infants in the U.S., but it is a number that sadly is declining, and we don't really know why it's declining. It probably has to do with the birth rate here in the United States is declining. Harmony works with birth parents who are considering adoption. So we do work with expectant parents. We provide counseling to them and also offer up to them approved families that are looking to adopt children. So we do those traditional infant adoptions.
And that's one thing I wanted to ask you about, Pam. I'm glad you're on the show today because I know Harmony does the matching in the traditional sense of the word, but you see now with this growth of social media, you see stuff popping up now where it'll be this beautiful couple that will say, hey, we're looking for a baby to adopt. And it literally is a social media ad. Is that something Harmony discourages? Is there a better way to go? Well, my concern from somebody who's done adoptions, private adoptions before, from a legal perspective, it makes me nervous for my prospective adoptive parents to go finding someone they have no ties with no agency, no counseling, and say, hey, somebody on Facebook or social media is, we found this prospective birth family. That makes me a little leery just because of the pitfalls of, a failed adoption. And that can be so devastating for a family that's waited to bring this child into the home. So how does Harmony address that with the social media? And, what do you do with that now? Because it's just changing so much now.
More and more families are finding a match with an expectant parent on their own. And that might be through social media. It might be through a personal contact. And my advice to people, and you're going to like this advice, is speak to your lawyer about it. And that as an advocate, your lawyer is going to advocate for you and tell you what you can and cannot do. And that's what we don't want to see is parents, adoptive parents, commit to something either financially or commit to something that is not consistent with the laws of the Tennessee. So we say, talk to your lawyer.
And that's my concern, obviously, from a legal perspective, is a lot of my people who discuss adoption with me, they are so willing and so eager to have a child into their home. And so I'm just leery because I know when they go through like Harmony Family Services, you guys are so regimented in a good way about, okay, here's things you can provide, here's things you can't provide. Let's be compliant with the law for these birth parents. And a lot of times these birth parents tend to be younger, so they're not going to have a huge background on, how the process works. So it just going without legal counsel or going through an agency, it strikes fear in my heart as an attorney and as a mother to think that you would lose, if it doesn't go through, if the adoption doesn't go to fruition, like how painful it can be for both parties.
I think that at Harmony, we believe that education is the way you want to go. And whether it's an expectant parent who's considering making an adoption plan or a prospective adoptive parent, education is where you want to start. So you need to make sure that people understand what the legal process is in Tennessee, and what the birth parents' rights are, what the process for approving adoptive families. All of that needs to be explained to them on the front end so that both parties can make informed decisions.
Right.
That's what we're about.
Because you have birth parents, I think some Harmony offers, from my understanding, you guys offer screening and evaluating of the birth parents, as well as counseling services for them and just educating, like you said. So these birth parents, this is a huge decision for them to entrust their child to someone else, so that these birth parents can go into this decision educated and confident that this is the best decision for their child.
Yes, that's very important. At Harmony, we primarily do very lawyer-driven adoptions, and one of the things we always want to do is to match our prospective birth parents with an attorney who will sit down and explain the entire process to them before the baby is born and before we go to court to do that legal surrender, so that it just prevents hiccups or issues in the future.
And that's one thing I tell when I have people consult with me about private adoptions. One of the things I talk to them about is you want your birth parents to be well informed. They have the opportunity to have counsel of their own. You want a birth parent to feel as comfortable and as confident in this decision. I think if you're out there, there's a million attorneys, there's a million realtors, there's a million counselors. you want to go to someone who's very well versed in this area so that it protects you and your child, whether you're the birth parent or the adoptive parent, on both the front and back end. And that's something we try to encourage. We say, look, let's make sure everybody's on the same page, make sure we have counseling. It's really what a lot of people I don't think realize you do, Pam, because of what Harmony does, but it is a team approach when you are placing a child.
Yes. And adoption, I think, is a bit different than other aspects of law. It is perhaps not as antagonistic. It is more collaborative,
right.
And we see all of the lawyers and all of the people involved in adoption really working together for the good of the child, the birth parents, and the adoptive parents.
That's what I say, look, we're all on the same team. We all have the same goal. So let's just all move together so that we can work through that. And I think that that's how you get to a successful adoption. Pam, one thing, and I know we're coming up on a break pretty soon, but one thing I want to talk to you, what's the average time frame on a waiting parent for an infant with Harmony? Do you know, or is a lot of people say, how long is it going to take? And the answer I say is I have no idea.
And that's what I say to people as well. A lot of that has to do with how many pregnant people come to my office, and it also depends on how many families I have at any given time. So I wish I could give people a time frame, but I really can't do that.
Okay. And one of the things, Pam, when you have if any listeners out there and they're considering placing their child for adoption, what is the best advice you can give them? Just to contact, Harmony Family Center and get educated and kind of know what their options are? Is that good advice for someone out there who's thinking, I may want to place this child for adoption and I don't really know where to turn?
I definitely would recommend that they consult with an agency, someone who is licensed in the state of Tennessee.
Right. And that's one thing, and Pam, we're going to continue talking about that when we come back, because with the creation of the internet and as it goes on, there's a lot of dangers out there, and we want our listeners to just be really well informed. So when we come back, we are going to continue talking about just some great agencies that are licensed and able to help you if you are looking to adopt or looking to place your child for adoption. So we'll continue with Pam Frye here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI, the News and Talk of East Tennessee, when we come back.
You're listening to Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton here on News Talk 98.7. Burton McInnish can be found online at burtonmckinnish.com or by phone at 865-233-1105. And now back to your host, Jennifer Burton.
Welcome back to Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. If you're just joining us, we're visiting with Pam Frye, the Director of Permanency and Adoption Services with Harmony Family Center. We spent the last segment talking about infant adoptions and some of the things that are available to our birth moms and dads and families. And so we're going to spend this segment talking a little bit about international adoption and embryo adoptions. But before we get there, we were talking about kind of the time frame for adoptions, Pam, and what to expect on infant adoptions. Another thing I want to, kind of touch on a little bit is there's a lot of agencies, and with the advent of the internet and the way it's growing, I mean, if you Google anything, which is how I tend to find, anything I need, if you Google adoption agency, there are so many out there. What should someone look for? And I know you're with Harmony Family Center. They're amazing. I know I've worked with people in your agency, so I can say that. What should people out there look for when they're looking for an adoption agency, whether you're a birth mom considering placing your child for adoption or a prospective adoptive family? Like what should people be looking for?
The first thing people need to look for is a licensed adoption agency. In Tennessee, it is actually a Class C felony for adoptive parents to pay someone other than a licensed adoption agency to match you with a birth parent. And that's just something that you just wouldn't know that unless someone told you that. So we always encourage, whether you're a prospective adoptive parent or an expectant parent considering adoption, work with a licensed agency. I also think from a birth parent perspective, I do think it's important that you work with someone who is local. And Harmony's not the only agency in Knoxville. There's Bethany Christian Services, and there's also Destiny Adoptions that are local here. But it is very important to work with someone local, because if you do that, you're going to have someone who's going to go with you to the hospital when you have the baby. You're going to have someone who's going to go to court with you when you do the legal proceedings of an adoption. If you work with an out-of-state agency, you're not going to have that hand-holding that you get working with a local agency.
And I think there's something to be said for face-to-face services and being able to see somebody, look them in the eye. I think it gives you a little bit of credibility and it gives you a little bit of comfort. And if you're going through the adoption process, it can be overwhelming at times. You're a birth parent and you're considering placing your child. This is a very big decision for you. If you're a prospective adoptive parent, you've waited, you've made the decision to adopt. This is a big time and in monetary investment for your family. And this is a lifelong investment because you're adopting and this is creating your family. So it is not something to be taken lightly. And Pam, I know you've adopted. What was your experience like? I mean, you are very uniquely situated that you can talk about this from a professional standpoint with your work at Harmony, but also from a personal perspective for our listeners out there who are thinking about, hey, we're considering adoption, we're praying about it, we haven't quite made the decision, but this is on our radar. I mean, what would you tell these parents and what's your experience? What was your experience like?
Well, my husband, like most people who look into adoption, were coming from a place of dealing with infertility. And our physician, whose name is Michael Duty, who's an infertility
and
doctor,
well-known here in
Knoxville, gave us the best advice. And he said, people think that adoption is expensive. And he said that at that time, adoption cost about the same as a new car. And he said, in the end, what's going to bring you more money, bring you more happiness, a new car or a child. And so that advice really, it rang true to me. And so we started looking into international adoption. And in 2002, we adopted our daughter from China, whose name is Catherine. And so she's 18 years old now, getting ready to graduate from high school.
Getting ready to flee the nest now.
Yes, she's going to flee all the way to the University of Tennessee. So,
that's awesome. That is awesome. And as an adoptive parent, you chose international adoption. There's so many different options out there for adoptive parents. There's adoptions, if you guys are unfamiliar, listeners out there, there's adoptions out of foster care here in Tennessee. If you're a foster parent, about 80% of the kids adopted out of foster care are adopted by their foster parents. That tends to be the least expensive because the state does offer a lot of supplements and grants and so forth that go with that. There's international adoption. Those numbers have been trending down since around 2013. Russia changed some of its regulations on adoptions and so banned the U.S. for adoption for a while. There's also embryo adoption, which is relatively new, just something that's come about in the last couple of decades, and it's really starting to come to the forefront where a lot of people have gone through IVF. They have embryos. They don't want to destroy the embryos, but we are able to create families, and have embryo adoptions, which has been great. So what kind of led you to choose the international adoption route? I love asking parents that because everybody has a unique reason about, they'll say to me, hey, Jen, this is why we decided to go the way we went.
I think adoption is a highly personalized decision, and you really have to make an inventory of yourself and what are your preferences, what are your resources, how long are you willing to wait, are you open to a child of a different race than you are you open to a child that's not a newborn? So for us, we were really drawn to a China adoption because it was very much an orderly process, and it was really all about doing your paperwork, paying your money, and waiting your time. And so that was just a really good fit for our personality. And also, we weren't tied into the idea of adopting a newborn or a child that looked like us.
Okay.
So it's sad that adoptions from China really are down tremendously, and they continue to drop just due to some changes in China with their policy about adoption, and so those numbers are falling. So that's sad for me.
That is, it really is sad. And you touched on something that is so personal. And I know if you've ever struggled with infertility, it can be such a personal struggle. Or if you've ever struggled with the decision on whether to expand your family or not, which is such a personal decision between you and your spouse. Or if you're single, there's a lot, now that we have people that are holding off getting married, we have a lot of single, especially females, I think as they get towards their late 30s, early 40s that say, I've not found the right spouse, but I know I really want to be a parent and have chosen to go the adoption route or have chosen to go the embryo adoption route that way. And it's so unique now that there are so many opportunities out there for families that want to adopt. And what is great is that it is not financially prohibitive. There is an option out there, and I encourage people. If you consult with, attorneys, there's a lot of tax breaks that you are available to you if you go through an adoption. There's some supplements if you adopt out of the state of Tennessee. There's some financial resources in that route. The average foster care adoption, I think last I looked, was under $3,000. And there's some supplements there. And like you said, when you look at the cost of adoption, and it seems out of reach, but I have some good friends right now, and they're adopting from a country in Africa, and I'm not their attorney, so I can say this, but they have a GoFundMe page. They're doing consignment sales. They're doing bake sales. They are doing just little things here and there to raise some additional money so that they can get the funding for adoption. So it's really an opportunity to be creative, I think, and say, look, once I've committed to the adoption, and like you said, take inventory of yourself. Are you in a position to do it? Are you mentally stable? Are you physically able to do it?
People often ask me, how do people come up with the money to do an adoption? But it's amazing the things that open up when you are creative. And the reality of it is that most people don't have $27,000 in their savings account ready to adopt a child. And so most people get it creative. They borrow against the equity in their house. They take out personal loans. They fundraise. So where there's a will, there's a way. So.
And that's what I've seen. I have some good friends, and they are parents in waiting in another state, and I love them dearly. So I cannot wait till they bring that child home, whatever that child age, size, shape looks like. We're excited for them. And I look at them, and they have done some really creative things. They've had friends and neighbors that have had yard sales for them. I mean, they've gone down to one car to save costs. I mean, they have really committed to, and so you can get really creative. They've sold T-shirts, for their baby, and just things like that, which is so awesome. And so at Harmony Family Center, what do you tell people as far as the cost goes? That's something on the forefront of a lot of adoptive parents' minds. What is an average cost, or what do you tell people to expect, or to set aside when they're looking to adopt?
A lot of that really depends on what type of adoption that you are looking into. Typically, adoptions that are done here in the state of Tennessee at a local level tend to be less expensive than trying to adopt an infant through an out-of-state agency. Those types of adoptions can be quite expensive, $40,000 to $50,000 to do to work with a large nationwide licensed adoption agency. International adoption can also be pretty expensive, $27,000 to $45,000, $50,000 as well, depending on the country. Of course, we know foster care adoptions are very low cost or no cost adoptions. Also, we have a lot of families that are doing embryo adoptions, which are expensive, but also less expensive than other forms of ways of growing your family.
Let's talk a little bit about the embryo adoptions. I know I went to a seminar back in 2014 up in Vermont, and New England, it seemed like the attorneys from up there seemed to be a little further advanced than we are in the Southeast as far as embryo adoptions, some of the artificial insemination procedures and the ever-changing laws. And a lot of that went into just, I think the legal landscape is changing very quickly on who can adopt and what kind of couples can adopt and single parent adoptions and this sort of thing. So the embryo adoptions, does Harmony Family Center do that? Do you facilitate those adoptions?
We do home studies for families that are doing embryo adoptions. And even though that we call them adoptions, technically they're not really adoptions. They are forms of assisted reproduction. And so we hook people up with the National Embryo Adoption Center, which is just down the road from our office. And so we're real fortunate to have that resource here in Knoxville.
Pam, I want to continue talking about that when we come back from our break. We are up on a hard break, and we'll be back in just a few minutes here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
You're listening to Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton here on News Talk 98.7. Burton McKinnish can be found online at burtonmckinnish.com or by phone at 865-233-1105. And now back to your host, Jennifer Burton.
Welcome back to Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton here on the News and Talk of East Tennessee, News Talk 98.7 WOKI. If you're just tuning in, we're visiting with Pam Frye, Director of Permanency and Adoption Services with Harmony Family Center. We have talked about infant adoption, a little bit about international adoption and embryo adoption. I want to get into, Pam, something you mentioned in the last hour. I heard you say home study. And home study is a word that a lot of my clients ask about when they come in, kind of, where do I go? How do I get one? How do we go about that? So Harmony Family Center offers home studies, is my understanding. And kind of tell the listeners, what does that home study involve?
I think that's a great question. A home study really is a twofold process. There's an aspect of a home study that is investigation, where we look into things like the criminal background. We also gather information about a person's medical background. So there is that part of a home study. But another part of the home study is education and really talking with that family about how they will raise a child that was adopted. And so there is that part of really trying to talk with the family and share with them the experience that we've had over the years of doing adoption. So it's a twofold process.
And I always tell my clients when we talk about home studies, I say, don't be scared about it. They're not coming in to make sure you've dusted the baseboards. Like, they are coming to meet you. They are coming to talk to you to see what you, and by you, your family, what is your family like? Like you said, they do criminal background checks. And I've had the question come up, well, I had a misdemeanor back 10 years ago. No, that's not going to necessarily preclude you. Like, obviously, they're not going to pass a home study if there's any child-related issues or some violence. But, if there was something small years ago, back when you were a 21-year-old, college senior, it's probably not going to preclude you and give you a negative check on the home study. So I tell my clients, just be prepared, be relaxed. Obviously they have their homes cleaned and that sort of thing, but just be yourself and let the people doing the home study kind of, let them see who you are. And a lot of it, like you said, is paperwork, making sure you're mentally prepared and that you're healthy, and you don't want a child who's being placed to have to lose a parent. Obviously that's not always foreseeable, but you want to make sure that there's healthy parents in a good placement. And one concern comes up when they have to sign releases on financials and that sort of thing, and they say, oh, but we're not rich, we can't. They're not looking for rich parents, they're looking for parents that can be a placement for a child. So,
we're looking for, can you pay your bills?
Right.
And do you have more assets than you have liabilities? Those are the basic rule of thumb, but you don't have to be rich. And for the most part, the home studies that we do, we're working with families who already have that child in their home.
Right.
So they've already demonstrated the financial ability to raise that child.
And I will say, if you're out there and if you're a foster parent, in order to be a foster parent in Tennessee, you have to complete what we call a PATH class. And parents as tender healers is what you have to complete. But I tell my parents that are doing foster care, go ahead and get your home study, because a lot of times once that child's in your home, you fall in love, you end up wanting to do the adoption. So go ahead and have that step ready.
Yes. The process in Tennessee is that someone signs up for PATH classes,
Mm-hmm.
and after usually about the second or third class, the family is referred primarily to Harmony to
Mm-hmm.
do their home study. And then the home study process for a foster care adoption and a private adoption are very similar. A lot of it is paperwork and verifying different aspects of your ability to care for a child.
Right. And then after, from the foster care adoption perspective, like once you've had a child in the home, and for those of you out there who don't know, the goal for DCS, for the Department of Children's Services, is supposed to be reunification with that family. Unfortunately, and this will tie in a little bit to what we talk about next show, because next show we're going to be dealing with the opioid epidemic. But a lot of times reunification is not able to be made. There's some barriers to reunification. And at that point, we were trying to place this child in a permanent home. And so there are a lot of adoptions out of foster care. What's the one thing you would really want your families to know if they're looking to adopt their foster child?
So you're talking about adopting the child in the home.
Right.
I think that the big thing is to take advantage of the resources that the state of Tennessee provides to you. And that includes preparation classes, going ahead and looking into our adoption support and preservation program, because we do preparation classes for that. Maybe attending some foster care classes, just doing whatever you can to be prepared on the front end.
And just from a legal perspective, there's a little bit of difference. In order to adopt in Tennessee, you just have to be 18, which does seem young, but we do have certain relative adoption situations I've seen where there's been younger people adopt. But to be a foster parent, you have to be 21. And you can do it if you're single, if you're married, if you're divorced. There's a lot of options out there. There are a lot of children who need foster homes. So if it's something you're considering, call Harmony Family Center and say, look, this is something I'm considering. And you're going to be able to kind of walk them through it, say, here's your next step. Here's some things to consider so that, listeners out there who are thinking about doing foster care can take that next step when they're ready.
Yes. And I will talk with anyone. I don't just talk about Harmony Family Center. I talk with people about all of your options, whether that is foster care, adopting a child from foster care, international adoption. I will be glad to talk to you and provide you as much as I know about adoption and foster care.
What is something that when you have adoptive families come in there, what is something, I know that we've all seen the heartbreaking stories when adoptions are not able to go completely follow through and the adoption be complete. What do you kind of warn your prospective adoptive parents? How do you kind of guard their hearts against the fact that, there may be a failure rate, it may not go through? Like how do you kind of prepare, your clients at Harmony for that potential?
I think the big thing is to reach out to other people who have adopted. I think that's an invaluable resource. Perhaps talk with someone who has had a failed or a disrupted placement. I think that is it's just an invaluable process to reach out to other people who have been through that experience. And I always tell people from an infant adoption experience, we don't have a lot of adoptions that fall through, but if it happens to you, it's a horrible thing, and it really is a tremendous loss. And it's a loss that not everyone in our country or our society has experienced. So it does feel unique and different. So we really encourage people to reach out.
It can feel isolating. I think that disruption of placement can feel isolating. And you brought up a good thing is reaching out to others. One of the things that's great, I know a lot of churches offer different foster care support groups and classes and so forth. And I know even there's some programs for some respite care. So like, for example, if you're fostering, you may have the option to have respite care, which is just where, somebody's going to babysit for you for a few hours so that you can go and, buy groceries without all your children with you and that sort of thing. So there's so many resources out there in East Tennessee. And I would encourage any listener out there considering either foster care, considering adoption, any kind of adoption. And there's a ton of different kinds out there, and they can all look different. And like Pam said earlier, they're all very personal. So contact Harmony Family Center and, just say, hey, look, this is what I'm thinking. This is what my husband and I are thinking about, my wife and I are thinking about, or I'm single and this is what we're considering, or a partner. And, here's what we're thinking about. And just, use these resources out there available to you, because there's so much out there that I don't think until you start digging. And so I like to tell people that one thing that we do have, and Harmony Family Center offers the post-placement services. A lot of times, I know in my practice, we do a lot of relative adoptions. Yeah. Those seem to be, I see a lot of grandparents adopting lately and a lot of aunts and uncles. And I think it ties into the opioid crisis. We have a family member who suffers from addiction, and they are just not able to get on their feet. They're not able to stay clean. And we have these sweet children that need permanency. And so relative adoptions are something that can be more cost efficient, because a lot of times our courts will waive the home study requirement. They'll waive the guardian ad litem requirement. They'll waive some of these requirements that do cost a little bit more money. So, but I think the best thing to do is to start with a resource like Harmony Family Center if you're thinking about adoption.
We have two programs that I think can benefit those relative caregivers. We have a grand family camp, which is something near and dear to my heart, and we do camps that are specifically for grandparents who are raising their grandchildren. So we have that. And then also our Fuse groups, our Families United supported engaged groups. We have foster or kinship families that can attend those as well.
And what do you tell people when you think about the legal process in the court? Does Harmony go? Do you physically go with your attorneys, or do you just get your clients ready to go and let the attorneys do the last little closure part?
Well, we certainly attend court with some of our families, not all of them, but definitely if we have placed a child in the home with the family. We're going to be there with them from beginning till end.
And that's what, Pam, I've enjoyed having you on the show so much today. And one of the things that, and like Pam said, choose a local agency. And I would just here's some free legal advice. I tell all my clients a little bit, do go to a local agency, go to someone who you can physically see, who you can sit down with, who can walk you through the process, who are going to know the mental health professionals that you may need to use along the way. They're going to know just some different resources. They're going to know kind of the courts and kind of how it ebbs and flows. And so I would just encourage you listeners out there that are considering adoption or fostering, contact Harmony Family Services. Contact my office, Burton McKinnish, at 865-233-1105, and we will help get you where you need to be to get the resources. One of the greatest joys as an attorney is seeing these families that are getting to celebrate having a new child come into their lives. And so it's so rewarding for us. I know Pam wouldn't be doing what she does every day if it wasn't so fulfilling for her. So, if you're out there and you're even considering this, call Harmony Family Center. Call my office at 865-233-1105. Let us kind of connect you with people who can answer your questions and help you out there. So I cannot tell you how this is probably my favorite show just because I love kids so much, and adoption is something near and dear to my heart. So thanks to you guys for listening. I can't wait until next week. We are going to be here and we're going to delve into the opioid crisis, which has created a lot of need for adoption. So we'll be here next week. And Pam, thank you so much for being here tonight, and I hope you have a great week. And thanks for being here with News Talk 98.7 WOKI, the news and talk of East Tennessee, with Justice Talks with Jennifer Burton.